أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وأفضل الصلاة وأتم التسليم على رسوله الكريم وعلى آله الطيبين الطاهرين وعلى أصحابه الغر الميامين ومن تبعهم بإحسان إلى يوم الدين اللهم اجعلنا منهم اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا وزدنا علما وعملا متقبلا برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. We begin by praising Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We thank Him, we acknowledge that He is the only one worthy and deserving of all praise and thanks, and we ask Him to shower His most complete and abundant blessings and protection upon His noble Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, upon his noble family, upon his shining companions, and upon all of those that follow them until the end of time. And we ask Allah to include us from among them. We ask Allah to teach us what will benefit us, to benefit us through what He has taught us, and to increase us in knowledge and accepted actions. Ameen. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I hope everybody is doing well. I hope everybody is having a fruitful and productive Ramadan. We are in the home stretch. I hope everybody is taking as much advantage as possible of these last 10 nights. And I pray that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allows all of us to be in a state of worship, in a state that is pleasing to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on Laylatul Qadr, and that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accepts from each and every single one of us. Ameen. Today we will be exploring just one tiny snippet, one tiny portion of the 26th juz of the Qur'an, and that snippet is found in the beginning passage of Suratul Hujurat. Suratul Hujurat is a surah that by many of the scholars of Quranic explanation is known as the surah of adab, the surah that has etiquettes, manners, rules and regulations on interpersonal relationships and how people should be dealing with one another to have a healthy, functional community and society at large. So in the beginning passage of this surah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala addresses all of the believers with a very important imperative and injunction on how we are supposed to interact with specifically the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, يا أيها الذين آمنوا لا ترفعوا أصواتكم فوق صوت النبي. Those of you who have believed, do not raise your voices above the voice of the Prophet. Do not make your voices higher, louder, above the voice of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Our scholars describe that the sababun nuzul, the cause of revelation, or the reason why this particular passage, this particular portion of the ayah was revealed, was in regards to an incident that took place between the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and Abu Bakr and Umar radiyallahu anhuma, wherein Abu Bakr and Umar radiyallahu anhuma had a little bit of a disagreement on a decision that they were advising the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam on. Abu Bakr radiallahu anh thought that it was appropriate that a particular companion be appointed a particular leadership position. And Umar radiallahu anh disagreed. He did not think that that particular companion should be given that position of leadership. And so they started disagreeing in front of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. They were arguing with one another. Abu Bakr radiallahu anh saying that all you want to do is to disagree with me. Umar radiallahu anh responding by saying, it's not about just disagreeing with you. I actually have merit to what I'm saying. And so they started disagreeing, arguing, and their voices became loud. Their voices became overpowering over the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And so this ayah was revealed. Those of you who have believed, do not raise your voices above the voice of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And it is said that after this incident took place and after this ayah was revealed, Umar radiallahu anh would speak so quietly and so softly around the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam would actually have to istafhamahu. He would actually have to say what? Like, what are you saying? Can you say it louder? Can you repeat what you said? So the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam actually wouldn't be able to hear him because of how softly he would speak, and he would have to ask for him to repeat it louder. So this ayah, in its most literal sense, is talking about the physical raising of voices above the physical voice of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And so for us in, 2024, we might be scratching our heads thinking, how can we apply this verse into our lives today, where we are unfortunately not in a position where we were privileged and honored to hear the beautiful, sweet voice of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. We aren't in that position to hear that and to then raise our voices above that. So how do we actually live according to this ayah in our day and age? There are at least two ways in which we can understand how we can live out this verse in our day-to-day lives. One understanding is that when we think of the voice of the Prophet ﷺ, we can take that voice further to think about his actual words, what he said, what he taught, what he encouraged, what he discouraged, his speech that is recorded for us in the ahadith, in the hadith literature that we have, the sayings and the actions and the approvals of the Prophet ﷺ that we have in written form, that we have as an oral tradition as well. And so we can think about, when applying this verse into our lives, whenever we hear that the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ is being spoken about, is being discussed, when we know that a saying of the Prophet ﷺ is being recited, our immediate response should be complete silence, where we give the words of the Prophet ﷺ their due respect, their due honor, and we listen carefully when they are being said, when they are being taught, when they are being discussed. So whether we are attending a particular lecture or a program, when we are sitting in a class, when we are in the Jumu'ah khutbah, when we are in any space wherein we know that the words of the Prophet ﷺ are being spoken about, are being discussed, are being narrated, we should give those words the ultimate respect, the ultimate honor and reverence, and that is shown by remaining silent, being quiet at these words, not being distracted, right? There's an aspect of physical silence where we don't speak over the hadith being said, the hadith being discussed, but there's also an aspect of mental silence where we put away the phone, we put away any other distraction, we don't look at the designs on the carpet, we don't start wandering off and thinking about what's for dinner. Rather, when the words of the Prophet ﷺ are being said, we focus completely on those beautiful, sweet words. We focus on their wisdom, we focus on their application, we focus on what is being said and how we can grow from those words being discussed by the Prophet ﷺ. Another aspect in which we can apply this ayah into our day-to-day lives is by taking a more spiritual approach and saying that when the Prophet ﷺ says something, when he says something, when he speaks about something, when he is again encouraging, discouraging, whatever it might be, we want that voice, that spiritual injunction, that advice to reign supreme over the voices of our desires, the voices of our wants, the voices of what we think is right, correct, and just. When the Prophet ﷺ says something, then everything else in our mind, everything else in our heart should become silent and submit to that. When the Prophet ﷺ encourages us to do something, but our soul is telling us, I really don't want to do that, we silence that voice and we do not raise that voice above the voice of the Prophet ﷺ. When the Prophet ﷺ says, stay away from this, do not go towards this is bad for you. But our inner soul is whispering and telling us, I want that. Go for it. It'll make you really happy in this moment. It'll make you successful in this life. Whatever it is, we want to lower that voice and let the voice of the Prophet ﷺ reign supreme, where we subdue our inner desires, we subdue our lower self, so that the voice of the Prophet ﷺ is higher. We do not want our desires, the voice of our desires, to be raised above the voice of the Prophet ﷺ. We want to subjugate ourselves so that we can obey the Prophet ﷺ in a manner that is most befitting and appropriate for him and his respect and his honor and his reverence. So in this ayah, again, we have this injunction, believers, Don't raise your voice above the voice of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And for us living in our context, in our day and age, we can apply this verse in at least two ways. One is by whenever the hadith, the sayings of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam are being spoken about, discussed, and taught, we silence ourselves. We listen intently. We listen with our full attention, and we do not have any other distractions that will go above the voice of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam's wisdom. And secondly, when we have our inner desires, our lower selves that are desiring something, wanting something, whispering to us to do something that goes against the sayings of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, then we lower that voice, we lower that inner voice, and we put the voice of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam above. We do not raise our desires above his wisdom. We do not raise our wants and our things that might make us happy in the moment over what the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam knows is going to be ultimately the best for us. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to help us benefit from this injunction, to follow it to the best of our ability, and to show the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam the ultimate respect and reverence that he is deserving of. Ameen. Subhanallahi wa bihamdihi, subhanallahi al-azim, subhanakallahumma wa bihamdik, nashhadu an la ilaha illa ant, nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilayk, wa sallallahu ala khayri khalqika Muhammad, walhamdulillahi rabbil alameen. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.